We've come into the Steiner School this afternoon to complain and see what they're going to say about this letter, dismissing us all from the school for complaining about things like our child being pushed down a bank, threatened with an axe. In December 2012, my family concluded a human rights mediation with a settlement through the Human Rights Commission of New Zealand. It was about the most reported problem in Steiner education, which is a pretty big deal. The statement of the settlement detailed several points that admitted the worldwide anecdotal reports of schools turning on the families of bullied children when the school had not done anything to stop the bullying. But those critical of this occult education system didn't think it amounted to much. Diana Winters, an administrator of the Plans Forum, said, "It's such a joke. The school admitted nothing." UK Steiner critic Melanie Bing said it was of limited wider relevance. And Andy Lewis of the Quackometer blog said it sheds no light on the nature of Steiner education, pedagogy and philosophy with respect to the often reported problems of unchecked bullying in Steiner schools. Strong criticisms indeed. You might find it surprising that supposed critics of such a system would try to run down actual help for children and families of bullying, and so did we. But these three went a lot further than that, and were actually part of a group that went out of their way to try and sabotage the mediation process while it was still taking place. These supposed researchers, skeptics and humanists tried to stop a human rights mediation which had nothing to do with them and which was actually designed to bring closure to the specific abusive events our own children experienced at the Titirangi Rudolf Steiner School in Auckland, New Zealand. True researchers would know that you hardly ever find a smoking gun, X almost never marks the spot, and in any even mildly covert situation you have to gather evidence from many different sources in order to reveal what was actually being concealed. And if that's true generally, how much more so in a cult? So we're going to take a look at this settlement within the context of the Steiner ethos and see exactly what it does reveal of the philosophy behind the pedagogy. We first need to make clear how dangerous it is to speak out against Steiner education. This is reflected in numerous anecdotes which describe in disturbing detail how many Steiner Waldorf communities deal with concerns about the safety of the children in their care. Anecdotes such as, they turn the victim and the victim's family into criminals worthy of expulsion. They literally demonise the whole family and create gossip and injury to the children. Or, those raising concerns were vilified to the point where their continued involvement with the school became untenable for them and for many others. Alicia Hamburg described it perfectly, stating, "Basically anything, invented, half-true or whatever, it doesn't really matter, that can be used against you, might be used against you in any distorted shape or form, anything to preserve the movement and to rubbish you." This treatment, publicly exposed by these critics, also happened to us. Our children were expelled from the school because our eldest, who was 8 at the time, was left alone in the bush with a notorious bully by a teacher who had promised not to do that. This bully, who, according to his kindergarten teacher, had been challenging from the beginning, then threatened her with an axe. Rather than deal with the situation, the school protected this bully and got rid of our children, including those who hadn't been bullied by the boy. They all had to go. When we complained about this, and I was being pressurised by many parents to deal with the bullying, all our efforts have come to absolutely nothing, so we're not able to...
We're just serving you with trespass notices. Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to take that.
Well, you will see, Heather, that it's been delivered, so could you now call the police?
The next thing the school did was to begin spreading misinformation about our family to the local community, saying our child made the bullying up to get attention, that she was asking for it, that we were unfit parents and dangerous people, etc., etc. This matches perfectly the Steiner treatment reported by families worldwide. So Andy Lewis is right to say that unchecked bullying in Steiner schools is a problem worldwide, one which Steiner schools usually deny, like when our child's former teacher, Suzanne Cole, along with the head of the Titirangi Steiner School, Mark Thornton, told a prospective parent after our child's expulsion that they did not have any bullying issues at the school. Now, it was important for this parent to believe that, as she was taking her child out of another school where his friend had just killed himself because of bullying.
Some months later, she reported this about the same boys who had bullied our child. Our son kept telling us that these boys called him dumb, stupid, closed a desk lid on his hands, told him that he's an idiot, slow, stuff he didn't even have to deal with at the other school. During the lunch breaks, he was subjected to more gang bullying by those several boys from his class. This actual issue with bullying appears to stem from a belief in karma within the pedagogy. Rudolf Steiner was such a strong believer in karma that his explanation for how a child came to be run over by a van was the karma of this child was such that the ego, to put it bluntly, had ordered the van and the van overturned to fulfil the child's karma. According to the pedagogy Steiner invented, there's a special bond between teacher and pupil. As the Toronto Rudolf Steiner Centre states, anthroposophically speaking, teachers are chosen by their students in the spiritual realm and karmically linked together in the physical world. There are many anecdotal reports like this from former Steiner families, such as this account, published in The Independent in November 2016. They believe it's the karma of the child and the child has to work it through themselves. And in a statement sent to the British government and reported in Stroud Life in August 2014, the Steiner idea of karma is used to justify and condone bullying. The disdain that Steiner teachers have for parents who raise concerns about bullying is perfectly exemplified by American Steiner teacher Eugene Schwartz. In this video, Schwartz promises to reveal proof of bullying in a Steiner Waldorf school. As he reads a letter he received from a parent describing these actions, he then cuts to the video the parent sent to reveal kittens play fighting. This is a crass attempt at ridiculing concerned parents and implies that what they're worried about is nothing but harmless fun. We found that resistance to dealing with bullying was incredibly strong at the Titirangi Rudolf Steiner School. It ranged from dismissing it all as merely boisterousness, boys will be boys, to telling us that stopping a bully from bullying would damage the child. In fact, they even printed in the school newsletter the following: denied his or her usual behaviour, a bully may simply become compulsive about something else, like video games. That same article had no problem shifting the blame onto the targets. Children who are regularly victimised by bullies may also be engaging in addictive behaviour. They've got it coming to them. We were also told that it was the anthroposophical impulse that was the reason that the school couldn't adopt a policy of zero tolerance to bullying.
And the only thing that we've taken exception to is violence, violent behaviour, which is not being incompatible with Steiner unless the Steiner philosophy itself necessitates violent behaviour.
This led us to ask the inevitable question, is bullying on the curriculum in Steiner Waldorf schools? So, back to the Titirangi Human Rights Settlement. In it, the school admitted that our child's account was honest, that the bullying she reported, including the axe incident, were therefore truthful, that some children in her class displayed bullying behaviour, that the school cancelled a meeting organised to discuss and deal with the bullying in the school. And the settlement added something else. The school admitted that they had encouraged us as parents at all times to pursue our attempts to resolve the problems of bullying with them, and that they knew that our intention was to protect all the children in the class. This was actually consistent with what the school handbook states, namely, it is important that parents speak directly with teachers about any issues that may be affecting their child's well-being. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? And that's exactly what we did. But in view of the sudden expulsions, the cancelled meeting, the trespass notices and the smears in the community, it might not surprise you so much to hear that when we alerted the Ministry of Education, the school handed them a copy of the exact same handbook, but with that passage removed. This kind of obvious setup is what's always reported in Steiner schools worldwide and what is described in the simple statements of the landmark Titirangi Settlement Agreement. So what about the opinion that it's of little wider relevance, not only in education generally, but specifically to Steiner schools? It just so happens that the Titirangi Rudolf Steiner School is also the headquarters of the Federation of Rudolf Steiner Waldorf Schools in New Zealand. As such, it's the direct point of contact between all the Steiner schools in New Zealand and the executive and spiritual centre of Steiner education worldwide at the Goetheneum in Dornach, Switzerland. Many of the staff of the Titirangi school also worked for the Federation. No one lost their job over this, or were even reprimanded. So it is reasonable to surmise that their actions are acceptable practice in Steiner schools, in New Zealand at least. But if that's not enough, there's this document from the pedagogical section of Dornoch itself. This was signed by many countries, including the UK, USA and New Zealand, and it states that one of the marked characteristics of a Waldorf Steiner school is that pedagogical methods will be used in dealing with discipline, i.e. it's the anthroposophical impulse which the school cited as the reason not to interfere with the bullying. It also states that schools or kindergartens which do not reflect these characteristics don't belong to the worldwide movement of Waldorf schools or Waldorf kindergartens. The Titirangi Rudolf Steiner School prides itself on teaching pure Steiner, and being the headquarters in New Zealand, they would have followed his teachings to the letter. Not dealing with the bullying must have therefore been how discipline is expected to be handled according to the pedagogy. We took the trouble to inform the Goetheanum of the school's actions and of the settlement. Although they were visibly shocked, they took no action. They delayed and obfuscated their response for months, offering minor inconsequential comments, and then they stopped communicating altogether. Obviously, we can only conclude that since all Steiner Waldorf schools are unified through several essential characteristics, what the Titirangi Rudolf Steiner School did reflects those characteristics, and it therefore still belongs to the worldwide movement of Waldorf schools. Rather than having to rely on anecdotal hearsay about unchecked bullying, which is pretty much all there is online regarding this problem and what those supposed critics promote, this human rights settlement, which is a legally binding document, describes the process accurately, point by point. The school won't deal with bullying, and if you complain about this, they'll chuck you out, because the bully's karma mustn't be interfered with, and then they'll blame it all on your parenting. So contrary to what these supposed critics want others to believe, this settlement looks like a pretty strong document. So much so, in fact, that we made the front page of New Zealand's biggest national newspaper and primetime TV.
You say your daughter was hit, held underwater and even threatened with an axe by older boys at the school. How did the school respond when you complained?
Well, they told us initially that they took this very seriously, but nothing happened. I mean, this took place over 4 months at the time that our eldest daughter was at that school. And the end result was that after the axe incident, they expelled all our children.
How do you reckon you'd feel, that karma thing, if a teacher told you?
I'd be hitting a roof.
Unfortunately, this coverage provoked the school into publishing a retraction where they went back on what they'd signed in the settlement in front of the director of the Human Rights Tribunal of New Zealand, stating once again that our child was a liar, that there was no bullying, and, of course, that it was all our fault. So what did the critics do about that? One of them, Alicia Hamburg, said, "I believe the statement by the school tells the truth, and that it also proves that the school is the more truthful party." Andy Lewis, who states that these schools are part of a dangerous cult and that nothing they say should be believed, also sided with that cult and used the school's illegal retraction in court. But what took place at the school and the many lies told about the settlement go far beyond the terrible effect it had on our family. It's actually much more tragic, and given the lack of consequences for the boys' bullying behaviour, also much more predictable. We learned about those consequences a few years later when we were informed that the same boy who'd threatened our daughter with an axe when he was 10 had now pleaded guilty, while himself still being underage, to having raped 3 minors at another Steiner school. Shocking, eh? The school's policy, fuelled by its anthroposophical pedagogy, set this boy up by protecting him from the consequences of his actions, and this led directly to the destruction of at least 4 lives, his own and that of his 3 victims. It's hard not to think this could potentially have been avoided if bullying wasn't on the curriculum at Steiner. But it's not just the school who bears this responsibility. Those critics who tried to sabotage the mediation and who worked so hard to destroy our reputation and our work because of it, what would have happened if they'd not vilified, stalked, harassed and smeared us, but had recognised the help we'd created through the Human Rights Commission for bullied children? We'll never know for certain, of course, but if more noise had been made about the schools revealing admissions, maybe, just maybe, that boy would have been kept more in check, and perhaps none of the ensuing tragedy would have had to happen. As it stands, influential people like Lewis convinced others that the Titirangi Rudolf Steiner School was right to attack my children, not because of any evidence in his possession, but merely based on the school's statements and the malicious lies of Melanie Bing and her cronies. Eventually, Lewis and Bing's lies forced us into court, because they included severe and malicious mental health smears and disability abuse, to discredit our Steiner experience and the work we did to expose it, and to get us shunned by the group of people who claim to fight against it. Their barrister, Jonathan Price of Doughty Street Chambers, then fought in court to rip apart our human rights settlement through lies and deceit. He convinced the judge, against the evidence and actual chronology, that the Titirangi Rudolf Steiner School expelled all our children because of what we published about the school, rather than the opposite being true, that we only went public, like any whistleblower, once all internal avenues had been shut to us, and only after our children had been expelled. All facts which are easily verifiable. Doughty Street Chambers was set up by Helena Kennedy, renowned for defending women from abuse. Yet despite the fact that she and her chambers were informed of Price's flagrant deception, a deception which has essentially protected a cult which we know abuses children, they've either never responded or blocked us, showing the hypocrisy of their public stance. Well, the Titirangi Settlement is still here. It exists. It cost our families so much to get and to defend, but we regularly get communications from people who are grateful that we did, that somebody actually took a stand against this karmic bullying. And we're proud of what we've made out of a horrific situation, and that it can have an actual positive effect in protecting others from similar bullying. The British judiciary's blatant protection of stalking and harassment in defence of the Steiner cult is all the more shameful in view of Amanda Spielman, Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Ofsted's statement in January 2019. My inspectors found instances where the approach to safeguarding protected staff rather than children because senior leaders and governors failed to address serious complaints from parents about a member of staff. Given the prevalence and seriousness of these issues across both state-funded and independent Steiner schools, they raise questions about whether these common failures are a result of the underlying principles of Steiner education. It is remarkably difficult to get the word out because, as we've seen, families who speak out are attacked and smeared. As the Telegraph stated in September 2017 that a local Steiner school had ignored repeated concerns raised by parents over safeguarding. A source close to the Steiner movement said there have been long-standing safeguarding issues at a number of Steiner schools, but people are afraid to speak out. Well, if you do speak out and are making positive progress, then the critics will swoop in, pick up the baton and smear you themselves. As documentarians, it's important that we try to view this extraordinary backlash for speaking out about bullying, spanning a decade of research and reaching across the globe, dispassionately in order to observe how it illuminates the size and clout of the Steiner Waldorf, Triodos Bank, Biodynamic, Camp Hill, Welida umbrellas. In the ensuing years, we've obviously talked to a lot of whistleblowers and understand how very few people grasp what will happen when they stand up and how they're opening themselves to a lifetime of attack, not only from the organisation they had to expose, but often from those pretending to be critical of it as well, who can so easily turn out to be just another layer of controlled opposition. Like the critics, who so eagerly join with a cult school to vilify whistleblowers who've managed to provide concrete evidence of exactly what the same critics are pretending to complain about. It's just not genuine to publicly complain of cult practices and then attack those who manage to provide concrete evidence of them, and to say it doesn't match up from your armchair. That's nothing about protection. That's about seeking personal glory and to make your own reputation off the backs of bullied children. The contradictions between these public critics and their supporters and the facts are so stark, they demand an answer to the question of who they're actually working for, because their actions play straight into the hands of the worldwide cult of anthroposophy.